Hi, my name is Pauline Chavez Maiden, and I will be presenting my research paper titled Urban Gardening and Polluted Soil, a Health Threat Ignored. Urban gardening, it has been growing in Dane and Dodge County in general, in the entire United States. It has a great deal of benefits, and some of them are exercise. You have a low-cost organic produce, and you have a lot of community building, people helping each other, donating the produce to pantries, and supplying produce to low-income citizens. However, the soil in any urban area with a history of manufacturing can be very, very polluted. And a study in 2014 showed that people who participated in urban gardening projects, any kind of community gardens, the gardeners interviewed for that study didn't really show any concern for soil pollution and any kind of toxic chemicals that were in their food. If when we looked at the gardening projects here in Dane County, we saw that it is very well managed. It's very well structured. Over the last 6 years, there has been large organizations that have formed together to form committees throughout the city and the county to promote gardening. And the UW Extension has also created a master gardening training program that also provides literature, online training, and they have a yearly community garden summit. Since 2012, from 2012 to 2016, there was a 46.5% growth in community gardens, and that shows in the paper. There's some community gardening committees that put out reviews for those years to show what initiatives have been proposed and undertaken, as well as the funding. And even though they have done a lot to organize and promote urban gardening shows and the growth, there really hasn't been much done or talked about soil pollution. And this is an area of concern because both Dodge County and Dane County are areas of historically bad levels of pollution in the soil and the water. And an article in the Midwest Justice Journal showed that there was significant pollution levels since the 80s. In order for me to determine whether participants in urban gardening programs showed any concern in soil pollution or any kind of pollution really, whether they considered soil testing and whether they had access to education on soil pollution, I called 4 different gardens and took a survey of 4 different garden coordinators. 3 of the gardens were in Dane County. 1 was in Dodge County. I interviewed the Midvale Heights Community Garden, Black Hawk Church Pantry Garden, Sun Prairie Community Garden, and the Beaver Dam Community Garden. Out of the 4 community gardens that I interviewed, 0 participants had asked the gardening coordinators about soil pollution or testing. So basically, nobody had brought up the issue to the garden coordinators. All gardens, actually, they were all tested for soil pollution at one point or another. Only the Black Hawk Church Pantry Garden was tested yearly. Everybody else, within the last 2 years, no results came back to the point where it gave them too much concern. But none of the garden coordinators had shared the soil pollution test with any of the participants, and mostly because they said nobody was really interested or brought it up. Only 1 of the 4 urban gardening projects has any kind of dedicated training. That's the Black Hawk Church Pantry Garden, but they only train on gardening techniques and not necessarily on soil pollution. Two of the gardens have master gardeners that have been trained by the UW Extension program, available for the participants via email. And one garden only offers links to the UW Extension program through their website if the gardeners or any participants in the gardening project want to learn more about gardening and any topic related to such. Now, this is very concerning because, well, basically we see that not much has changed since 2014, the 2014 study. We really don't see anybody having any kind of concern for soil pollution. And that's very disturbing because there's a lot of unhealthy levels of bioaccumulated persistent toxins in the soil and in the water, in Dane County particularly. And program coordinators were not discussing soil pollution or testing results because, well, nobody really brought it up, even though it is a topic of importance, and they recognize that it's a topic of importance. And, one of the things that they had not considered, that even if pollutants were not present at the time of testing, pollution can be carried into the soil by different methods, particularly water, changing infrastructure, wind. So if there's construction going on, it can blow toxins into the area. So levels of pollution can change. And even small amounts of pollutants are very toxic and harmful to humans, especially children. So if they're donating the produce to pantries, and all of them are in some way or another, you're affecting people with probably, don't have a lot of access to medical treatment. So you're affecting a vulnerable population, especially the little kids. And there's a lack of emphasis on the dangers of soil pollution on behalf of the urban gardening program. So it's just not something that they're thought of. Through all the literature that I saw and I researched, I did not see anything brought up about soil pollution in any of the committees, any of the summits. Soil pollution is mentioned at the UW Extension in some of their literature, but you have to do a lot of digging to find it. In conclusion, I'm very happy to see that urban gardening is growing and that people are embracing growing their own food and being more sustainable. It offers a lot of benefits. It promotes exercise, it builds community, and just contributes to the well-being of many, many people, not only the gardeners themselves, but also their families, their friends, and those who receive their generous donations. However, soil pollution is a fact. We have been neglectful of our environment. Therefore, we have a legacy of urban pollution, especially in the Dane and Dodge County area. And that, of course, can be traced back to poor land management and poorly written laws that manage soil pollution. And even to this day, it's still happening. But I think urban gardening projects are not talking about it because it's a very uncomfortable topic to bring up, and it can discourage people from participating in gardening projects. There are ways to mitigate soil pollution effects on produce, such as using raised garden beds. However, there is a particular type of raised garden beds, and washing produce, obviously. However, if people don't talk about it and there is no awareness, if the gardeners are not thinking about it, if the people who manage the projects, the urban gardening projects, are not talking about it, even though they're testing the soil, then it can turn into an issue where you could have soil pollution and have small amounts of pollution and toxins getting into people. And in the long term, you can have very damaging effects to vulnerable populations, to the gardeners themselves, without any knowledge and communication. And I think a lot of this has to do with our continual desire to just kind of ignore the consequence of pollution, basically, and the fact that we are responsible for polluting our own soil and having to be careful and not being able to eat the food that we plant. So I think there's a lot of layers there that need to be uncovered. We don't know why the gardeners are not thinking about it. We don't know why. I mean, we know that the master gardeners and the garden coordinators are not talking about it because they're not being asked. Um, but I think more research has to be done to consider why. Why are people not thinking about this, and how can we bring it up and still promote urban gardening? So I really enjoyed doing this research project. It taught me a lot about the psychology of how communication happens and what is said and what not said, and especially to be careful with urban grown produce, because yeah, we kind of damaged ourselves that way. So I will never look at soil and soil pollution the same way again without feeling a little bit of responsibility. But I really do hope that eventually, urban gardening programs decide to tackle on the issue earlier than later to prevent their population from becoming ill. Thank you very much.